Welcome to episode 7 of our Mindful Transition channel. I'm here with Ian Kay, and we are both certified coaches through IPEC. And Ian, how are you today? How's everything going?
It's going pretty good. I'm actually kind of excited. It's a beautiful day out, so I'm gonna go do a workout later today outside. So,
That's awesome. I'm excited about the topic today. We're going to be discussing about the whole concept of trusting the process. And we know that during transition, there's a lot of uncertainty in transition, and whether that may be in a relationship, whether may that be in sports, going to a new team. Right now is a time where a lot of hockey players are starting to think about their next season, especially a lot of the junior hockey players. So they may be billeting with someone else. It's also a lot of time where people are even reevaluating their relationships. Do they want to stay in the relationship? Some it's springtime, or actually almost summertime now, and so they're now getting into new relationships. So there's a lot of transition going on. People are going back to work, so transition changes in the air. So this whole idea of trusting the process. So why don't you start off, Ian? What are some of the elements that are important to really just adopting the discipline of trusting the process?
it goes into sort of like what we've talked about already. So it's about having that awareness. So noticing what's going on, not only with yourself but around you. It's about accepting, the circumstances. So being able to see what's going on and then accepting those things. And it's accepting them for the facts. So not the story we're telling, but really the facts of what's happening. Um, and not really judging them, just sort of looking at them the way they are. And then sort of like when we talked about choice and conscious choice. So really being able to take those facts for what they are, taking the awareness, being able to see everything that's going on, and coming to a conclusion that you're making a choice and you're making the best choice you can. Now, where trusting the process comes in is now trusting that choice and trusting that awareness and trusting the accepting everything that's going on to give you the best possible outcome because you're making the best possible choice that you can.
In other words, what we're doing is we're just building in the foundations of awareness, self and outer awareness, the acceptance about ourselves, situations, and things the way they are, and also the idea of that we're making conscious choices, that we're choosing to go in the direction we're going to. And so then the next step, as we talk about, is the idea of trust in the process. And one of the things that we do know is that whenever there's change, any kind of change, there's always a bit of not a bit. Sometimes it's a lot of uncertainty because we don't really have context to where we're maybe going. People that have been married for a long time all of a sudden don't even remember what it's like to be single. There's a lot of athletes that may be going to teams with a whole bunch of people that they've never known before. There's a lot of and change. There's a lot of uncertainty, and with a lot of uncertainty comes fear. So talk to us about fear.
Well, fear really, when you think about it, it clouds your judgment. It makes you take less action. It gives you sort of that unknown, sort of stops you in your tracks. It creates sort of that you begin thinking inside of your head a lot and sort of doubting and questioning. So it's a lot of like internal thinking that you're doing, and sort of there's sort of like, a lot of times people sort of say that there's sort of like a paralysis with fear.
It's,
So
it's that whole idea of paralysis by analysis.
yeah, so it's just one of those things where like when we have that fear, and especially in the cases that we're talking about, like going to a new team or being single for the first time in 20 years, let's say, um, it's that fear sort of stops us, and it stops us from taking action on what what we're actually out to accomplish in the moment, and what are and towards the goals that we've actually sort of set for ourselves.
And I think too with fear, when I love the meme that one of the acronyms that people often use as fear is false experiences appearing real. So we're actually in the moment and we're projecting ourselves to an outcome that maybe negative or maybe painful. And so one of the things that we know about the future, it can't be the truth because it hasn't happened yet. It's a possibility. And I think that when you really consider that, is that if we were to actually change that acronym from the false experiences appearing real, is face everything and rise, and where it's more of an action step. And the point that you made about fear is that because fear is a lower contracting catabolic energy associated with worry, doubt, sadness, and all those other lower emotions, it actually will lower our level of engagement in whatever we're doing. And as well, something that we discussed prior to this was the idea of confidence, and how when we're able to elevate to a higher level of awareness and consciousness, our confidence naturally goes up with that. And the one thing that we understand as fear is that fear and trust actually ride the same teeter totter. When fear goes up, trust goes down, and when trust goes up, fear goes down. And trust in what? Well, trust in, if you're a spiritual person, trust in God, trust in universe, trust in higher power. You're trusting the process, whatever that process is of going somewhere else, or choosing to be single, whatever that whole process is. Even trusting your own ability to manage the change. That's a big one, right? And in the end, it's really just it's learning how to trust not only the process of what's going to happen outside of yourself, but also trusting the process that goes on inside of ourselves. And if we if we remain in fear, we're going to find that we're going to be second guessing ourselves. We're going to be, like you said, we're going to be overthinking our situations, and we may be using our imagination for worst case scenarios. And in those case scenarios, we may not be even 100% confident that we might be able to handle that worst case scenario, right? So as far as that, so where do you think, as far as the trusting the process, what do you think can get in the way of somebody truly trusting the process?
Um, there's a lot of things that come up. So, really, one of the major things that I think that sort of comes up is just knowing what to do. A lot of the times that we approach situations and we don't know what we actually want, or we don't know what we know to do. Um, so it's interesting. A lot of the times, if we think of that, when you have fear, do you have a plan? Or if you have fear, do you really know what you want, or do you really know what you're going after?
Yep.
And it sort of speaks to that sort of analogy that you used, like that teeter totter. As you trust it, or you have that plan, you have that confidence, that trust sort of increases, which decreases the level of your fear. So we're not talking about fear won't ever show up during this process. We're talking about it will be lessened, or the impact of it won't be there. Um, and the other sort of thing is that gets in the way is really ourselves most of the time. And well, what I mean by that is it's just we begin to doubt our own process. We begin to stop trusting ourselves and stop trusting what we know to do.
You got some really good points on there, and then one point that really stood out for me is this whole idea of not knowing what to do. And I think that really goes back to the fact that we're so used to doing in life and striving, and sometimes what happens in transitions or change, we can't clearly see what that next rock or what the next step's going to be. And that's why somebody once said that we either live from our past, or we live by inspiration. And inspiration is quite often it's just that feeling that you know it's the right direction, and you may not know how you're going to get there, but you know it's the right way to get there, or that it's the right thing for yourself. And I think that sometimes we have to think about that. It perhaps it's not what we need to do, but who we need to be. Right? Who we need to be. We need to be trustful. We need to be. Sometimes we just need to be courageous. We could feel the fear, but we act anyways. I think that when we focus on who we need to be during the transition, we need to be compassionate with ourselves, with other people. We when we focus on being, it's something that is really about being. It's about in the present moment, and as we know, everything that happens in the present moment is real because it's happening. At least it's real to us. And I think the challenge that we get into is that people get into this horizontal thinking about the past or the future. And it's interesting. I think it was Eckhart Tolle that said this. That was really interesting. He said that problems only exist in the past or the future. And in the moment, all we ever have is situations. And if we could look at everybody that's listening to us has all had difficult things in their lives that they've difficult changes and transitions in their life, but all of us have been able to go through it. How do we know that? Kids, you and me are still here. People are still watching us. So we've all managed these situations, sometimes better than others, but we've managed it. And the challenge about focusing on your problems is that a lot of these problems were never created in the present moment. They were created from thinking. So therefore, looking for an answer in the moment about something that wasn't created in the moment in the first place is kind of insane at times, right? So I think that really learning to differentiate between what you perceive as a problem and what's a situation. And by learning and remembering that no matter how difficult it is that we're going through and how we may not be able to see the next step, trusting that in the past we've been able to manage whatever's come our way, and using that past catalog of us walking through things to have the confidence that we have now to just know as long as you manage this moment, you're managing your life, because our life goes from one moment to another moment. So if we can show up in our most engaged and most aware and most trusting version of ourselves in this moment, it sets us up for the next moment.
So it reminds me of, I think it was Confucius that said it. Our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in every time we fall. But sorry, in rising after every time we fall. Um, and it just sort of speaks to this, right? Like, and if you think about it, even if you've gone through all those different situations, all those different transitions, all those changes that you've gone through, when you're going through them, are you aware that you're necessarily going through them sometimes? No. Sometimes yes. But how do you feel? Do you feel great during those times, or do you feel great after you've like like surpassed it or gotten through it or overcome it? It's really that feeling in that rising and getting up from it where we really get to sort of see who we are and what we're capable of. So and that sort of speaks to sort of trusting that process, is trusting ourselves and trusting that our past experiences, we can use those, and we can trust in the moment that we're doing the best and we know what we're doing to really rise and become and be that person that we need to.
And you had a really good point there, and trust that we're doing our best. And I think that's really important is that um, nobody ever wakes up and in the morning and says, you know what, I'm just going to half-ass my life today. People don't consciously choose to do that. And I think that we really have to remember that all of us at any given moment are doing the best we can based on the information we have, our level of awareness and acceptance that we have at that given moment. We can only do our best. And if we really believe that we're doing the best we can, and we believe that other people are also doing the best they can, then perhaps it can give rise to just some acceptance that everything is exactly the way it should be. and that there's no need for us to start creating problems about the way things are supposed to be, right? Because in the end, um, life is about action. It's about acting. It's about engagement, right? And we never would truly fail or make wrong decisions, because that's one of the things that happens. And I noticed this a lot in people that are in the 30s and 40s that I've coached, that are thinking about career transitions or relationships. Is this the one? Should I marry her or not, or marry him? Should I just be a chiropractor, or should I be a doctor? And I think that there's this fear of making the wrong decision or marrying the wrong person and all these things, right? And so I think that really understanding that in the end, we don't make wrong or right decisions. We don't make mistakes. Quite often, we label that after the fact, right? Right? If you're in an unhappy relationship, or you find that you hate being a doctor, these are all things after the fact. But if we were to have this magic wand and take people that feel they made a mistake back to the point of that decision making process, they would make that without any hindsight. They would make the exactly same decision. So really, it's that whole thing about life is act, learn, act, rinse and repeat, right? Act and learn, right? Because we never really lose. We're always winning or we're learning.
Sorry. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So I like that the whole thing about mistakes. It's you, you mistakes. I like to sort of say it this way: mistakes, they only occur in our past. So like, if I made a mistake right now, I would only know it's a mistake because it's already happened. Mistakes don't sort of arise in the future. Well, I could make a mistake in the future, but it's not a mistake until after I've made that choice, or I've made that decision, or I took that action. So, and that's something a lot of people, just in my experience with clients, that they've sort of struggled with. So we're not sort of saying mistakes don't happen. We're not saying that they're right or wrong. We're just saying, like, just curiously look for yourself.
And
Where do you find your mistakes?
correct. And I think that's really important too, is to really develop a belief that you know more than you know. Like we've talked briefly about the idea of horizontal thinking, right? What's the logical thing to do here? How do I feel about it? What's my gut telling me? Nobody knows you like you. Nobody knows me like me. And if we have this belief that we're just going to make a decision, we're just going to move forward with that faith that no matter what happens, I'll learn from it, and really understand that we really do know more than we think we know. We just need to have the patience to, and also the understanding that we can tap into our logic. We can listen to our emotions, and the emotions don't have to have us. Emotions will give us data as to what the situation is at. But then the whole idea of having being able to tap to our intuition. So really, we know more than we know, and we're always doing our best, and nothing more. So I think that the whole idea of trusting the process, just to kind of tie it up, is that when we're trusting the process, we're cultivating the idea of self and outer awareness. We're accepting things about ourselves, about our situations, about where we may be going or where the transition is going. And then what we're doing is we're just making conscious choices. We're just deciding that, you know what, based on um, what the logical thing to do here, based on how I feel, and also based on what my gut's telling me, I'm just making a decision. And worst case scenario is I'll learn something from it. Best case scenario, it'll kind of keep me moving towards my passion, or where I want to move forward in life. So that whole and the whole idea of the concept, somebody once said that without confusion, we would never truly see clarity. So everything that we think in our lives that may not have value, when we get past that particular transition or change, we'll be able to look back on it. Oh, okay, so that made sense why I was confused, because I needed to be confused in order to be able to seek the clarity, ask the questions, experience the things I needed to experience to get to where I needed to get to.
Yeah, and just to sort of add to that is the one thing that sort of came to me was we all a lot of the time trusting our process. So it's not about following someone else's or following someone else's plan. Can someone else's plan and someone else's advice help us and support us? Yes. But ultimately it's our process. So it's how we take action on that, how we apply that, how we think about it and how we move forward with it. That's our process. So it's really about creating our own, finding our own way through as opposed to following someone else's.
Which is a great segue to next week, where we will be discussing the whole idea of what's it mean to be authentic? What is authenticity? This word gets tossed around left and right. Hey, keeping it real, let's be authentic. So I think that this is a great segue into what we'll be discussing next week. And I really look forward to that. And Ian, it was great today discussing trust in the process. And I really feel that we've given people some things to think about, as a lot of people are right now going through a lot of changes and a lot of transitions in their lives. And thank you for taking this time to share this whole concept, this discipline of trust in the process.